Hey, everybody, it's Natalie Benson-Vanga, and welcome to another edition of Facts Over Fear. And the fear part is something I really want to touch on today because there is a lot going on internationally that involves the Trump regime, from Venezuela to Greenland to Iran, and of course, domestically here in Minnesota, where things have really ramped up. So we're going to be touching on that as well. I'm with my friend Taylor Goel. He is an organizer for the Party of Socialism and Liberation here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And we're going to be talking, what does all of this mean as it relates back to capitalism and imperialism? And is there anything that the average person can do? Because part of the reason I wanted to talk, I don't do a ton on international politics on my show, but I'm getting a lot of DMs from people that are feeling incredibly hopeless, incredibly scared. And I want to ground us and talk about what exactly is happening, but also what we can do to organize and to fight back against people who are really just trying to control the masses. And so thank you so much, Taylor, for being here with me today.
Of course. Thank you for hosting me, Natalie. It's always a pleasure.
Absolutely. I just want to kick things off and start with Venezuela. We've been hearing a lot about what is going on there, but I want to ground us in the reality that a lot of people outside of the last few weeks have probably not heard much about Venezuela, maybe don't even know where it is on a map. So let's just get back to basics quickly. I want to give you a quick rundown. Venezuela is located in the northern end of the South American continent, covering an area about 1.3 times the size of Texas. It's a country of more than 28 million people. It is bordered by Colombia to the west, Brazil to the south, and Guyana to the east, and the Caribbean Sea to the north. It is famously a petrostate, and I know, Taylor, we're going to talk about the importance of that in Trump's, adventures, so to speak. It is home to the world's largest oil reserve. Post World War II, it had the fourth highest GDP per capita globally and had previously earned the nickname the Millionaire of America, thanks to its oil wealth. Now, we all know what has been happening in the last few weeks, but I just wanted to give an update via Reuters. This just occurred about 2 hours ago that the United States has seized another Venezuela-linked tanker. This is what officials told Reuters on Thursday, January 15th, which is today, ahead of a meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and the Venezuelan opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado. Taylor, as we dig into all of this and starting with Venezuela, can you talk a little bit about what your experiences understanding this from a democratic socialist perspective, a socialism perspective? What concerns you the most about Trump's adventures abroad?
Sure. Thanks, Natalie. And thank you for that introduction as far as that information you gave, which is very useful for the listeners. I want to start with the fact that this is obviously an outright act of war. It's basically making a mockery of any form of international law. All that aside, and I mean, it's left 100 people dead, some civilians, women. But all that aside, this is also, in terms of the Trump regime, it's a war in the sense of an idea. The
Mhm.
idea that people in the global south can basically assert their own sovereignty and take a stab at basically determining their own future. The problem, the reason Venezuela is in the crosshairs of the US imperialist projects, not only because of the plunder and the physical gains that they want to basically have by turning Venezuela into a state that's run by a government that's whose strings are in the hands of the U.S.
Mhm.
But it's also by trying to overthrow the government in Venezuela, which is actually using the oil that or
Yeah.
trying to use the oil to make advances in the social, in the economic sense for the benefit of the people of Venezuela. So it's really like also back in Cuba, the
Mhm.
idea that a nation that's so-called in the backyard of the U.S. empire can
Mhm.
actually refuse to abide by the dictates of the U.S. empire is something that's unacceptable in terms of the U.S. Imperialist ruling class.
And I want to just pull that thread a little further. And if you see me looking down, Taylor, or anyone watching, it's because I'm getting a thought and I'm pulling up some more notes, but I am listening. Um, Also, what is of interest, I think, to the empire, as you're putting it, is that Venezuela also holds significant deposits of critical minerals that are vital for AI. And we're seeing this mad rush. And I've been questioning, why are we so uh, being so chaotic about getting these data centers up and running here, without taking a minute to look at the impact of them on our environment, on our community, on our labor force, et cetera. But it didn't escape me that Venezuela is a place that holds many of these rare minerals that are necessary, for AI chips, for servers and electronics, for smartphones, laptops, and for data center GPUs, which fuels AI hardware. Do you think this also plays in to this idea of the people that control Venezuela can then control how quickly data centers can be up and running in the United States? Because I do see a connection here that I don't see mainstream media talking about outside of the oil reserves.
Yes, definitely. I mean, the mineral reserves that Venezuela has, US is also after that aggressively because of
Hmm.
this mad rush for AI.
Hmm.
If you remember, a couple of months ago, the Trump push for Ukraine when he was trying to cut a deal, he was forcing Ukraine to have to surrender all there because Ukraine is another area where there are a lot of these metals that's needed for producing these chips that basically support the AI. So that's definitely, certainly another potential gain that they are looking at. So
Hmm.
as far as the AI goes, I think it's like any other technology.
Hmm.
The bigger question is, for whose interests is that technology being used?
That's
So
right.
we go in two ways. And I mean, I'm not saying let rush headlong without any control as to the environmental possible problems that it's going to create with all these data centers, but uh, rethinking it in terms of if there was a government in power that was actually upholding the interests of the majority, the working people, one can possibly imagine AI working as a technology that might help facilitate, simplify the lives of everyday working people.
Hmm.
But that's not how it's going to work, right? It's going
Right.
to be used to eliminate even the scarce jobs that the workers have, or push the wages down for the existing jobs because there's the threat of automation.
That's right.
Again, technology in itself could be used one way or the other. So AI is, I think I would like to think of it in that form. Given that the drive for these data centers and more AI is only with the interests of the capitalist class. That's why the workers, the majority, is not going to really benefit from that. And not to mention, as you also said, all the uh, the hunger for more power and electricity and water usage, which will cause have other implications in the environmental sense.
And I think that's an excellent point. And the way I am framing this conversation currently is within that capitalist imperialist framework. Now, you and I, at the end of this conversation, I'd like to talk about a world beyond this where we can discuss what it would look like if we were sharing resources in a way that benefited the many and not just the privileged few or the billionaire class, the ruling class. I'd like to move on because there are so many places of tension right now internationally, and I do not want us to get bogged down too long, just for time's sake. Greenland, and if you didn't hear me, I almost like took a breath here because it's been weighing on me, this idea that now the Trump regime is looking to Greenland in a much more aggressive way. He had been talking about this earlier in the last couple of weeks. I think the news cycle is moving so fast, you guys, it's hard to just keep up with this sort of whack-a-mole administration and where they sort of putting their attention next. PBS just did an article yesterday. It says a look at the strategic importance of Greenland as Trump escalates threats. President Trump said that he hoped for a resolution on his threat to annex Greenland, but disagreements remain. following Vice President Vance and Secretary of State Rubio meeting with the foreign ministers of Denmark and Greenland at the White House. Um, Trump told a reporter from PBS, he said, Greenland is very important for the national security, including of Denmark. And the problem is, there's not a thing that Denmark can do about it if Russia or China wants to occupy Greenland, but there's everything that we can do. I find this fascinating, Taylor, because up until very recently, and maybe I'm naive to think this, but it didn't seem like Greenland was on the radar of Russia or China in this imminent danger sort of way. And now the Trump regime is putting it into that framework and saying, well, if we don't act, they will act, and we need to be in control of it because we're the good guys and they're the bad guys. Can you explain how this fits this expansion of the empire, and why is Greenland of so much interest to the Trump regime in this moment?
Sure. Well, first off, yeah, that's just really baloney, right? There's no
Right.
imminent threat of Russia or China laying their hands on Greenland, which itself is right now within Denmark's control.
Right.
I think this goes back to a foreign policy um, that the Trump and Vance regime is trying to implement. It goes back to their sort of looking back at the 1822 Monroe Doctrine, which
Mm-hmm.
by any means necessary declared that the Western Hemisphere is going to be under the power, under the influence of the U.S. And Greenland, I think, falls in that basically re-establishment of that aggressive imperialist policy.
Mm-hmm.
Not that the U.S. Uh, government policies before were not imperialist, but at least, or not at least, but they were trying to frame it in other ways, right? It was of bringing democracy to this, that, or fighting this dictatorship to bring liberation for the people. With the Trump regime, I think they're just being blatantly open as to
Yeah.
what they're trying to achieve. Greenland is a strategic location for trade routes. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's to be not underestimated, especially also given the environmental situation with the melting of the polar ice cap, with new kind of shipping routes opening up in the north. So I think that's also probably what they are considering, having uh, like grabbing Greenland in terms of that strategic importance. So that's probably the one of the other reasons that they are eyeing Greenland.
It's fascinating to me, Taylor, that Trump ran on the fact that America was spread too thin and that we were in too many places, and that this was going to be, if he were elected again, an America first policy centered, no more wars, no new wars, etc. And what I'm doing right now in my mind is counting how many places he's threatening to invade or is currently invading. When you think of this from a perspective as a citizen, what are you hearing from people who either voted for Trump or didn't vote for Trump, and the dissatisfaction or satisfaction about the direction of American policy as it pertains to international spaces?
Sure, very good question. And I think this recent escalation or war against Venezuela is a good indicator of where people's minds are.
Yeah,
When you think about it, this is supposedly the democracy we're living under, and more than 70% of the US population was against any action against Venezuela, yet they
yeah.
did it. So this is really at this point, and I mean, when I say Democrat, Republican, I mean the working people,
Mhm,
the working people who might have voted Republican.
mhm,
They might not necessarily mean they're racist and all that. There are certainly many racists that vote for
mhm,
Trump, but many people reject the idea of war.
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
but with it's a similar thing with the war at home against the immigrant communities. I think
mhm,
if you were to do a survey, you would find that it's more than 50%. A majority of the U.S. born workers would basically denounce what ICE is doing in terms of the terror that it's unleashing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that then brings us to the question of whose democracy, whose system, whose interests, whose America first. For Trump, there is an America and that he's trying to put first, but that's not our America. That's the America of the oil barons, that's the America of the bankers, that's the America of the military industrial complex. That's not the America of the honest, hardworking people that may have voted Democratic or Republican one way.
Mm-hmm. No, I like your framing of that too, because I couldn't agree more. I think sometimes these differences are meant to divide us and pit us against one another. And instead, we as working people very much outnumber the ruling class. And if we pooled our resources and our ideas together, I think we could create something that would be much more equitable and just for the many and not just the privileged few. Before we touch on the terror that ICE is putting on American citizens, in particular right now, Minnesota, which looks like an actual war zone. I want to talk a little bit about Iran because this was concerning. um, on many levels. The fact that it seems to continually be ramping up and then it seems to quiet for a moment and then ramp up and quiet. And just the way Trump was even talking about the people of Iran, trying to act as though we were a part of sort of this idea of liberation, when once again, the things that are happening in Minnesota fly in the very face of his fake philosophy. This article is from NBC News. And it says Trump would want military action in Iran to be swift and decisive. Sources say the president told his advisors he would want any action to deliver a decisive blow to the Iranian regime. But so far, he hasn't gotten the guarantee from them. He told his national security team that he would not want to spark a sustained war that would drag on for weeks or months. If he does something, he wants it to be definitive. But Trump's advisors so far have not been able to guarantee to him that the regime would quickly collapse after a military strike. Those dynamics could lead Trump to approve a more limited U.S. military offensive in Iran, at least initially. When we're looking at what's going on with the great people of Iran who are fighting for their freedom and have been fighting for decades. What do you make of Trump trying to step in and act as though he is somehow a savior for these people, and that being the reason he would want to topple this government?
Well, you framed it right. I mean, the people of Iran, whatever freedom struggle they're involved in, do not need Americans to bring them their freedom, right? The
Mhm.
people of Iran have the right to determine what sort of government they want to be living under, what
Mhm.
sort of society that they want to build, and that's their choice. Um, U.S. interventions never ever bring any liberation or make things better.
Right.
Let's look at Iraq, right? Iraq was under the rule of Saddam Hussein, and then U.S. went in there with the pretext of bringing freedom and democracy. More than 1.5 million people were slaughtered by the occupation, and one can objectively ask: Is Iraq in any better uh, shape or form right now? So the fact that we were saying no to U.S. intervention in Iran doesn't necessarily say anything, and we don't have to say anything about the struggle in Iran. That's for the people of Iran to fight their own fight and bring
Mhm.
forth a society that their majority want to establish. Same goes for Venezuela. Saying no against an intervention in Venezuela doesn't necessarily make one. I mean, I, as a member of the Party for Socialism and Liberation, I do have a sympathy towards the Bolivarian revolution and the
Mhm.
policies of Chavez and Maduro. But for anyone to say no to that U.S. intervention doesn't necessarily mean they have to be supporting,
Right.
the policies of Bolivarian government. Same goes in Iran. One thing that's really crucial here is that and this has happened through the ongoing genocide in Palestine.
Mhm.
Israel and U.S. has attacked Iran, um, luckily it didn't turn out into a really even more genocidal regional escalation, but there is no guarantee that that may not be, because Iran is a strong state that has significant military power that could
Yeah.
actually turn the whole region into a much bigger war that involves other powers, and that will be a disaster for the peoples of the region.
And I think that's what's terrifying about all of this is just all of the places that are kind of escalating because of the United States's intervention at the same time, or the desire to enforce our will, right? And I think what's interesting about this moment in history, as we see these cycles repeat, right? We saw what happened with the rise of Hitler and how it impacted the globe, and I think we're very much watching this replay. And the reason I say that is because of what is happening in Minnesota. And when we turn our attention from the international lens and put it back on the national lens, the same tactics, that same exertion of power through brute force that we are pushing on other nations like Venezuela, we're now seeing the regime of the United States trying to impose its will in that way on the people, and it's not working. And this is what I find fascinating. To your point, Taylor, and this is why I wanted to have this conversation with you, because I've always respected and admired the way that you talk about community and the way that you talk about the people, because it is up to the people how they want to live, how the majority chooses to live. And so, to your point, how the people of Iran want to live is up to them. And they are fighting to live in the way that they want to be free, right? But that's what's happening here in Minnesota. We're seeing the escalation of tension, the escalation of violence being perpetuated onto the people by ICE, by these federal agents, by these masked men with weapons. And the mayor was telling people to go home. And the people said, hell no. We're not just not going home. We're going to come out bigger. And it's putting pressure on ICE at this point. Can they continue that escalation? Because it's going to be spreading them thinner and thinner and thinner. And if they want to exert their will, they're now seeing they can't do that without the buy-in from the people. And I find all of this fascinating. So I just want to read to you a little bit about what I've been seeing happening in Minnesota and get your thoughts on this as well. So tensions, this is from ABC News. Tensions continued early on Thursday morning in Minneapolis as protesters clashed in the streets with law enforcement following the second shooting there in about a week involving a federal officer. The Department of Homeland Security said that on Wednesday, a federal law enforcement officer shot a person who said they had fled a traffic stop and then, along with two other people, began attacking the officer. I want to add, I watched a video, and I want to verify this further, but the woman who lives with the man that was shot claimed that that is not true, that they had actually entered the home and that ICE had shot through the door after they closed the door on ICE, hitting the man in the leg. So I'm working on further verifying that, but I wanted you to note that, because I do not think we can just at face value take what the Department of Homeland Security is saying anymore, which is also a breakdown in trust between the people and the government, which further escalates tensions, etc. As you look at this as a domestic terrorist, situation, because that's how I'm framing ICE at this point. They are domestic terrorists. How do you think the American people can come out of this stronger and more connected? Because I want to look beyond the moment that we are in if we're going to survive this.
Yeah, thank you for that update, and great question. What is the tactic or strategy for the people to basically fight back against this ICE terror? One, I think, as you also alluded to, community is one of the most important things that we can build. Community is one that the ruling class doesn't have, but community, just as a community, doesn't really have power. So what kind of power can we actually exercise? And I think, and this is already called for the 23rd in Minneapolis, but also for the 20th, the anniversary of Trump's regime, right? there's a call for a general strike. If the majority of the people walked out of work, walked out of schools, basically made this machine stop, that's when that will actually hurt. As always, right? Strikes are one of the things that the ruling class fears the most, because ultimately, for the system to continue, the people have to work, and that work that they do and the wealth that they create are essentially the source of the wealth for the capitalist class. And if that work stops, that's when the dynamics change. So that's why I think the call for a general strike, and I mean, we don't want to kind of water down the call for general strike at any time anything happens. We don't want to be calling it for the sake of calling it. But I think this currently uh, the balance, like the way things are unfolding, a general strike would actually one help make people realize their own power, um, and then the other thing I think is continuing on the struggles to get the elected officials in the local sense to pass, even though they're limited, stronger legislations in defense of immigrant communities. That's, I think we talked about this, maybe it was almost a year ago, remember, Natalie, that
Yes.
we wanted Pittsburgh to pass legislation, and that's still not happened.
Yeah.
But that's also where people can actually unite behind projects that push the elected officials, whether they're city council people or mayors, to fight back, or to be able to at least facilitate the fight back by not allowing cooperation between the local police and the ICE terror.
I couldn't agree more. And I also want to add to what you were talking about with the general strike. Um, we really should be getting our unions involved, right? Because the unions are a great place. They already are a group of organized people organized around labor. So that would be a good place to start in terms of how do we get this going. And two, I think it's important to note not everyone can strike, right? We've got a system now set up where we have a lot of gig economy workers. We have a lot of people living paycheck to paycheck, and that's been done to them on purpose by the system. But they can plug in other ways. They can do other things. They can provide funds to the people that are on strike. They can provide meals, mutual aid. So I encourage people to look into their mutual aid organizations that are in their local areas, in their backyards, and see where can I plug in? Because this is a time to lean into the community organizers that have been doing the work. If you're new to activism, if you're not sure where to start, ask questions and ask, what can I do in this moment, right? Can I call my representatives on my lunch break? Can I send funds to my local abortion clinics? Where can I plug in to make sure that everyone has what they need as you state, as we ramp up towards these larger national calls to action? The thing I don't want people to do is to feel hopeless and paralyzed in this moment and overwhelmed, because that's the goal. They're trying to flood the zone, right? This is the terminology we've been hearing, and that's a real thing. So the fight against that energy is a way to plug in to what is going on in your backyard. And I always tell people, support an organization that doesn't impact you directly. I think it's really important for one another to look and see who is the other and how can I lean in to supporting the others in my community that may need help, because they come for the most vulnerable first. But Taylor, as you and I know, it never ends there. If people want to learn more about the Party for Socialism and Liberation and the work that you're doing in the area, in the region, where can they go?
So they can act like PSL Pittsburgh is our Instagram handle. I mean, not that life on social media is the only. Obviously, this is just to tune in so that they can, because we have a very active group here that's involved in multiple struggles, including the immigrant rights, labor struggles, anti-war, anti-police brutality. But if they follow us on PSL Pittsburgh Instagram, they can see all the upcoming events. And PSL is a national organization that has branches more than 100 plus cities across the US. And they can follow the PSL national account for more analysis and articles on ongoing domestic and international issues as well.
Taylor, thank you so much. I really hope you can come back more regularly. I really enjoyed this conversation. I always learn so much from you when we get a chance to connect.
Thank you, Natalie, for hosting me.
Absolutely. And you guys, if you just tuned in, don't worry because I'm going to get this up on my Substack newsletter probably within the next 30 minutes to an hour. So make sure you are subscribing above and then you can play this back at your leisure. You can also check out a lot of my videos on YouTube and Spotify. And of course, I do a ton of writing here and have just expanded. We're going to have a few more contributors joining Facts Over Fear, which is really exciting. So everyone, please take care of yourselves. And we'll be back again probably tomorrow. We got some more stuff cooking. So thank you, everybody. And thank you, Taylor.
Thank you, Natalie.